The day started like any other Tuesday for Thomas Collins. He had just finished his shift at the local warehouse and stopped by Main Street Convenience for a cold drink and some snacks. The small store was nearly empty in the late afternoon, with only the cashier and one other customer browsing the back aisles. Thomas grabbed a sports drink from the cooler and a bag of chips, then headed to the checkout counter. "That'll be $4.78, said the cashier, a young man with tired eyes who had been working since early morning. Thomas handed him a $5 bill. The cashier put it in the register and gave Thomas his change, 2 dimes and 2 pennies. Thomas counted the money in his palm. "I think there's a mistake," Thomas said quietly. "I gave you a 5, not a 10. The cashier frowned. "No, you definitely gave me a 10. "I don't even have a 10 on me today," Thomas explained, pulling out his wallet to show the cashier. "Look, I only have a couple ones left after that 5. The cashier crossed his arms. "Sir, I know what you gave me." "The register shows I took a 10, Thomas sighed. He was tired after working 10 hours straight, and now this misunderstanding was the last thing he needed. "Could you please check the register? I really did give you a 5. Are you saying I don't know how to do my job?" The cashier's voice rose slightly. "No, I'm just saying there's been a mistake," Thomas replied, trying to stay calm. "I worked too hard for my money to just give away $5. Their voices grew louder as the disagreement continued. The other customer in the store glanced over nervously and then slipped out the door. 20 minutes earlier, Officer Ray Bennett had started his shift with the usual briefing. 6 years on the force, Bennett had been having a rough few months. His divorce was finally going through and he'd been sleeping poorly for weeks. His sergeant had already spoken to him twice about his attitude during traffic stops. "Keep it together, Bennett," his sergeant had warned just yesterday. "I'm getting complaints about your tone with civilians." The call came in as Bennett was driving through the downtown area, a disturbance at Main Street Convenience. Probably nothing, he thought. Just another shoplifting teen or homeless person causing trouble. He turned on his lights but not his siren and pulled into the small parking lot outside the store. Through the glass front of the store, he could see a black man leaning over the counter, apparently arguing with the cashier. Bennett felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as he radioed in his position and stepped out of his patrol car. He adjusted his belt and straightened his shoulders before pushing open the door, causing the electronic bell to chime. Both Thomas and the cashier turned toward him. "What's going on here?" Bennett asked, his hand resting casually near his taser. "This customer is causing a problem," the cashier said quickly. "He gave me a 5 but now claims it was a 10 and wants more change." Thomas shook his head. "Officer, that's backward. I gave him a 5 and he's only giving me change for a 5 when he rang it up as a 10. I just want what's right." Bennett stepped closer to Thomas. "ID," he demanded, holding out his hand. "I don't understand why I need to show ID over a $5 misunderstanding," Thomas said, confusion crossing his face. "I'm just trying to straighten this out." "When an officer asks for ID, you provide it," Bennett said, his voice hardening. "Now," Thomas slowly reached for his back pocket. "I'm just getting my wallet, okay?" "Move slower," Bennett snapped. Across the street, Lucia Diaz was walking her dog when she noticed the police car. Something about the officer's body language made her pause. She pulled out her phone and began recording, a habit she'd developed after seeing too many videos of encounters gone wrong. Inside the store, Thomas handed over his ID. Bennett studied it and then looked back at Thomas with narrowed eyes. "You've been causing trouble here, Mr. Collins." "No, sir. Just a misunderstanding about change." Bennett turned to the cashier. "Is this man threatening you?" The cashier hesitated. Well, not exactly threatening, but he was getting pretty loud. "I wasn't loud until he refused to check the register," Thomas explained, frustration evident in his voice. "Look, this is silly. It's just $5, mate, so now you admit it's $5? Bennett stepped closer, invading Thomas's personal space. "First it's 10, now it's 5? Which is it?" "That's not what I meant," Thomas said, taking a small step back, his hand slightly raised in a calming gesture. "I just want to resolve this and go home. Don't back away when I'm talking to you," Bennett said, moving forward again. Outside, Lucia continued recording. 2 more people had stopped and were watching through the glass. One of them, a middle-aged woman, had also taken out her phone. "Officer, please," Thomas said, his voice steady but concerned. "There's no problem here that needs this kind of tension." "I'll decide what the problem is," Bennett replied. Put your hands on your head. What? Why? Thomas's eyes widened in disbelief. Do it now, Bennett shouted, suddenly grabbing Thomas's arm. I'm not resisting, Thomas said clearly, placing his hands on his head. I'm cooperating. But Bennett was already spinning him around, pushing him face first toward the counter. Thomas stumbled slightly, trying to regain his balance. Stop resisting, Bennett yelled, though Thomas wasn't fighting back. I'm not, Thomas began. What happened next took only seconds, but would change many lives forever. Bennett grabbed Thomas by the shoulder and neck, then swept his legs out from under him. Instead of controlling the fall as his training required, Bennett drove Thomas downward with full force. Thomas's head hit the hard tile floor with a sickening crack that made the cashier gasp and step back. Thomas's body went instantly limp, blood beginning to pool beneath his head. Bennett knelt on Thomas's back, reaching for his handcuffs before realizing the man wasn't moving at all. Outside, Lucia's hand shook as she kept recording. Oh my God, she whispered. The woman beside her was already on her phone calling 911. I need an ambulance, the woman was saying urgently. An officer just slammed a man's head into the floor at Main Street Convenience. The man is unconscious and bleeding. Please hurry. Inside, Bennett finally seemed to realize something was very wrong. He rolled Thomas onto his side, revealing the man's slack face. Dispatch, I need medical assistance, he said into his radio, his voice suddenly less certain. Suspect is unconscious following a takedown. The cashier had backed all the way against the wall, his face pale. He wasn't even doing anything, he whispered. He was just standing there. More people had gathered outside now, many recording with their phones. 2 more police cars pulled into the lot, followed closely by an ambulance. The paramedics rushed in, immediately pushing Bennett aside to attend to Thomas. He's got a severe head injury, one paramedic announced, stabilizing Thomas's neck. Possible skull fracture. We need to move now. As they carefully lifted Thomas onto a stretcher, one officer pulled Bennett aside while another began taping off the scene. Bennett's face had gone blank, his earlier anger replaced by a 1,000-yard stare. Within minutes, the paramedics had loaded Thomas into the ambulance. They worked frantically as they sped toward County Hospital, where a trauma team was already being assembled based on the paramedics' urgent radio calls. Back at the store, Lucia sent her video to her sister with instructions to save it and share it. By nightfall, it would be viewed more than 1 million times. By morning, it would be on national news, and Thomas Collins, who had only wanted a cold drink after a long day of work, lay unconscious in a hospital bed, machines breathing for him as doctors worked to reduce the swelling in his brain, uncertain if he would ever wake up again. The bright, harsh lights of County Hospital's waiting room made everyone look sickly. Lisa Collins had been sitting in the same uncomfortable plastic chair for 3 hours. Her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her younger brother Michael paced back and forth, occasionally stopping to stare out the window before resuming his path across the worn linoleum floor. Family of Thomas Collins? Lisa jumped to her feet as a doctor in blue scrubs approached. The doctor's face was lined with exhaustion, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. I'm his sister, Lisa said. This is our brother Michael. How is he? The doctor gestured to the chairs. Please sit down. Those 3 words sent a chill down Lisa's spine. Nothing good ever followed an invitation to sit. Thomas has suffered a severe traumatic brain injury, the doctor explained, her voice gentle but direct. The impact fractured his skull and caused significant bleeding and swelling in his brain. We've performed emergency surgery to relieve the pressure, but what? Michael asked, his voice cracking. We've placed him in a medically induced coma to give his brain the best chance to heal. Right now, that's the best thing for him. Lisa pressed her hand to her mouth. Will he wake up? The doctor's face remained carefully neutral. It's too early to say with certainty. The next 72 hours will be critical. I wish I could give you more definitive answers. Can we see him? Lisa asked. Yes, but I need to prepare you. He's in the ICU. There are a lot of machines, tubes, and monitors. His head is bandaged and there's significant swelling to his face. It might be difficult to see him like this. Michael turned away, wiping his eyes quickly with the back of his hand. Lisa stood up, straightening her shoulders. We need to see our brother. Across town, Police Chief Warren Henderson rubbed his temples as he watched the video for the 6th time. The footage from the convenience store had already been shared thousands of times. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since 9 p.m. last night. when the first news outlets picked up the story. "Play the body camera footage again," he said to Lieutenant Patel, who sat across from him. The lieutenant nodded and clicked play on the laptop between them. Officer Bennett's body camera showed a slightly different angle than the bystander videos, but the outcome was unmistakable. Thomas Collins had not been aggressive or threatening. The takedown was clearly excessive, the impact of Collins's head against the floor audible even through the recording. "Jesus," Henderson muttered. "What the hell was Bennett thinking?" "His record hasn't been spotless," Lieutenant Patel said cautiously. "There have been 3 complaints of excessive force in the past year alone. And what happened with those complaints?" Patel shifted uncomfortably. 2 were dismissed after review. 1 resulted in a written reprimand. Why wasn't I informed about this pattern? The complaints were handled at the sergeant level as per protocol. None reached the threshold for escalation to your office. Chief Henderson stood up abruptly and walked to the window. Outside, he could see a small group of protesters beginning to gather. Their signs were simple but powerful. "Justice for Thomas Collins and who polices the police." "The mayor's called twice this morning," Henderson said. "The FBI has opened a civil rights investigation. This is a disaster and it's only going to get worse." "What's our official statement going to be?" Patel asked. Henderson turned back to face her. "We're placing Bennett on immediate administrative leave pending a full internal investigation. Make it clear that what happened in that video does not reflect our department's values or training protocols." "And the Collins family? Should we reach out?" Henderson paused. "Not directly, not yet. Our lawyers advise against it. But make sure someone from community relations checks in with the hospital daily. I want to know his condition." As Lieutenant Patel left to draft the statement, Henderson sat back down heavily in his chair. 23 years on the force, the last 5 as chief, and he'd never faced a crisis like this. He reached for his phone to call the mayor back, knowing no explanation would be enough. Lucia Diaz hadn't expected to become the center of a media storm. After her video of the incident went viral, reporters had found her social media accounts and had been messaging her non-stop. She'd agreed to speak with one local reporter, a woman she recognized from the evening news. "I just recorded what I saw," Lucia explained, her dog Cooper sitting loyally by her feet during the interview. Something felt wrong from the moment the officer walked in. The way he carried himself, how he immediately got in that man's space. "Did you hear what they were saying?" the reporter asked. "Not everything, but the store isn't that big. I could tell they were arguing about change or money. Something small, nothing that should have ended with someone in the hospital." The reporter nodded sympathetically. "What went through your mind when you saw Officer Bennett take Mr. Collins down?" Lucia paused, gathering her thoughts. "Honestly, I thought I was watching someone die. The sound of his head hitting the floor," she shuddered. "I've never heard anything like that. And the officer didn't even seem to realize what he'd done at first. He was still trying to handcuff him while the poor man was bleeding and unconscious. Your video has been viewed millions of times now. How does that feel?" "Terrible and necessary at the same time," Lucia said. "Terrible because it shows something that should never have happened. Necessary because without it, who knows how this would have been reported." The initial police statement just said a suspect was injured during an altercation. That's not what happened, and now everyone can see the truth. After the interview, Lucia checked her phone. She had dozens of messages of support, but also several threatening ones from people calling her anti-police. She took a screenshot of the worst ones to show to her brother, who was a lawyer. Then she looked up the visiting hours for County Hospital. She wanted to check on Thomas Collins and his family. It felt like the right thing to do. The ICU was eerily quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of machines. Lisa sat beside Thomas's bed, talking softly to her unconscious brother while Michael stood by the window, unable to look at Thomas for too long without breaking down. Thomas lay perfectly still, his head wrapped in white bandages, a breathing tube down his throat. His normally warm brown skin looked ashen under the hospital lights. A network of tubes and wires connected him to machines that monitored every vital sign, breathing for him, feeding him, measuring the pressure in his brain. "The kids are asking about you," Lisa said, holding Thomas's unresponsive hand. "Dion made you a card. He drew you as a superhero." She smiled sadly. "Kelly says she's saving her allowance to buy you a Get Better Soon present." The door opened quietly as a nurse came in to check Thomas's vitals. Any change? Lisa asked, the same question she'd been asking every hour. The nurse shook her head gently. His condition is stable. That's good news right now. As the nurse adjusted Thomas's IV, Lisa's phone buzzed with a notification. It was another news alert about her brother. The story had gone national now, with major networks covering it. Lisa had turned off the TV in the waiting room after seeing Thomas's face on the screen alongside footage of protesters. Michael came to stand beside her. Mom's flight lands in 3 hours. Should I go pick her up or do you want to? You go, Lisa said. I can't. I don't want to leave him. Michael nodded, squeezing her shoulder before heading out. As he left, he nearly bumped into a tall man in an expensive suit who was about to enter. Excuse me, the man said. Are you family of Mr. Collins? Yes, Michael replied cautiously. Who are you? The man handed him a business card. Anthony Washington, attorney. I'd like to speak with your family about what happened to your brother. Michael studied the card. There have been several lawyers trying to reach us. Why should we talk to you? Because I've handled police misconduct cases for 20 years, and what happened to your brother is one of the clearest examples of excessive force I've ever seen. Also, because I'm not charging you anything unless we win. Michael hesitated, then handed back the card. My mother arrives tonight. Come back tomorrow morning. We'll all talk then. As Michael walked away, he passed a small group of uniformed officers standing awkwardly in the hallway with flowers and a card. He recognized one of them from the news, Lieutenant Patel. She stepped forward as if to speak to him, but Michael kept walking, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Whatever they had to say could wait. His family had already heard enough empty words. Inside Thomas's room, Lisa continued her one-sided conversation with her brother, telling him about ordinary things, neighborhood gossip, the weather, her children's school projects, as if speaking these normal, everyday details might somehow anchor him to the world and help him find his way back. All the while, the machines kept their steady rhythm, breathing for Thomas, monitoring his heart, measuring the pressure in his damaged brain. Outside the hospital, the crowd of protesters had grown larger. Their chanting could be faintly heard even up on the 5th floor. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. 1 week had passed since the incident at Main Street Convenience. The small conference room in the Internal Affairs Division was crowded with files, laptops, and empty coffee cups. Detective Gloria Chen pinned another document to the already cluttered investigation board. Let's go through it again, she said to her partner, Detective Will Torres. I want to make sure we haven't missed anything. Torres nodded, flipping through his notes. Officer Ray Bennett, 6 years with the department, responded to a call about a disturbance at Main Street Convenience at 5:17 p.m. last Tuesday. Chen picked up the thread. Upon arrival, he encountered Thomas Collins and the store clerk in a verbal disagreement over change from a purchase. Collins claimed he gave a $5 bill and received change for a $5 when the register showed $10. The clerk claimed Collins gave him a $10. According to witness statements and video evidence, Torres continued, Collins showed no physical aggression toward the clerk or Officer Bennett. He was unarmed and made no threatening gestures. Chen walked to the TV mounted on the wall and pressed play on the remote. Bennett's body camera footage began playing. Watch his approach, she said. Body language is tense from the moment he walks in. Hand near his weapon. Confrontational stance. They watched in silence as the scene unfolded again. Collins's voice remained steady throughout the exchange while Bennett's grew increasingly agitated. Then came the takedown, swift, violent, and entirely unnecessary. Pause it there, Torres said as the video showed Collins hitting the floor. That's not how takedowns are trained in the academy. Bennett used a modified leg sweep, but instead of controlling the subject's descent, he drove Collins down with his full body weight. Chen nodded grimly. Definitely not protocol. The academy teaches control techniques, not whatever this was. She walked back to the investigation board and tapped 3 folders pinned to the left side. These are the previous complaints against Bennett. Let's review them again. Torres opened the first file. Complaint filed February last year by Jerome Wilson during a traffic stop. Wilson claimed Bennett was verbally abusive and unnecessarily rough while handcuffing him for a suspended license. Dashcam showed Bennett using proper procedure but with excessive verbal aggression. Complaint was marked unfounded after review. Chen frowned. Who conducted the review? Sergeant Frank Hobbs, Bennett's direct supervisor. The same supervisor who reviewed the next two complaints. Torres checked the files. Yes, all three were reviewed by Hobbs. Chen made a note. We need to interview Hobbs again. I want to know why these patterns weren't addressed. Torres moved to the second file. Complaint from April. Homeowner called about a suspected break-in that turned out to be her teenage son who'd forgotten his key. Bennett reportedly drew his weapon on the teen despite the mother explaining the situation. Mother filed complaint alleging racial profiling and excessive force. Bennett claimed he observed furtive movements that made him fear for his safety. Resulted in written reprimand. And the most recent? Chen asked, though she knew the details. August. Bennett responded to a noise complaint at an apartment complex. Resident Andy Park claimed Bennett shoved him against a wall during questioning. No witnesses besides Bennett and Park. Complaint dismissed due to lack of evidence. Chen stood back, studying the timeline they'd created. 3 complaints in 18 months, all showing a pattern of escalation and aggression. And now this. She gestured to the frozen image on the screen showing Thomas Collins unconscious on the store floor. There's something else, Torres said, pulling out his phone. I just received Bennett's psych evaluation from last year. Department mandated after his divorce, and? Evaluator noted signs of stress and emotional dysregulation, but cleared him for duty with a recommendation for follow-up counseling. Did he attend the counseling? Torres shook his head. No record of it, Chen sighed heavily. So we have an officer with known emotional issues, a pattern of escalating force, inadequate supervision, and now a man fighting for his life in the hospital. She turned to face her partner. This isn't just about Bennett. The whole chain of command failed. In the small chapel at County Hospital, Grace Collins sat alone in the front row. At 68, she'd raised 3 children on her own after their father died, worked 2 jobs to put them through school, and had never asked for anything in return. Now her oldest son lay upstairs, machines keeping him alive, while she prayed for a miracle. The door opened quietly behind her. Grace didn't turn around, assuming it was another reporter trying to get a statement. Mrs. Collins? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Grace turned to see a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. I'm Lucia Diaz. I was there that day, when Thomas was hurt. I recorded the video. Grace studied her face. You're the witness? Lucia nodded, remaining by the door as if unsure of her welcome. Come sit, Grace said, patting the bench beside her. Lucia walked forward slowly and sat down, leaving a respectful distance between them. I've wanted to meet you, Grace said, to thank you. Thank me? Lucia looked surprised. For what? For bearing witness. For making sure the truth couldn't be buried. Grace reached over and took Lucia's hand. Without your video, who knows what story would have been told about my son? Tears welled in Lucia's eyes. How is he? The same. The doctors say we just have to wait. Grace's voice held steady, but her eyes revealed her exhaustion and fear. The swelling in his brain has gone down a little. They say that's a good sign. Lucia hesitated before asking, Do you mind if I visit him? He needs all the friendly voices he can get, Grace said. The nurses say hearing familiar sounds might help, though I don't know if he'd recognize your voice. I could read to him, Lucia suggested. I work at the library. I'm pretty good at reading aloud. For the first time in days, Grace smiled genuinely. He always loved books. That would be nice. Attorney Anthony Washington spread documents across the dining room table in Lisa Collins' home. Michael sat beside his mother Grace while Lisa made coffee in the kitchen. The evidence is overwhelming, Washington explained. Multiple videos, witness statements, the medical reports. There's no question of excessive force. The police department is already preparing for a civil suit. What does that mean for us? Michael asked. It means they know they're liable. They'll likely offer a settlement rather than go to trial. Grace looked up sharply. Money won't wake my son up. Washington nodded respectfully. No, ma'am, it won't. But it can ensure he gets the best care possible. And it can send a message that this kind of behavior has consequences. Lisa returned with coffee mugs. What about criminal charges? Will that officer go to prison for what he did? That's up to the district attorney, Washington explained. I've spoken with their office. They're waiting for the internal affairs investigation to conclude before making a decision. So he could just walk away from this? Michael's voice rose in anger. It's possible, but unlikely in this case. The video evidence is too clear. The public outrage too strong. The bigger concern is whether they'll charge him appropriately. There's a big difference between aggravated assault and a lesser charge like official misconduct. Grace sipped her coffee silently, then set the mug down with determination. Whatever happens with the officer, I want something good to come from this. Thomas would want that. What do you mean? Lisa asked. I mean changes to the system. Better training. Real accountability. Some way to make sure no other mother has to sit by her child's hospital bed because of an officer who lost control. Washington made a note. That can be part of our settlement demands. Departments are increasingly open to policy changes as part of civil settlements. Good, Grace said firmly. Because I'm not just fighting for Thomas now. I'm fighting for all the Thomas Collinses out there who didn't have someone recording. Officer Ray Bennett sat alone in his apartment. Empty takeout containers and unwashed clothes scattered around him. The TV played in the background muted. He hadn't been sleeping well. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Thomas Collins hitting the floor, heard that sickening crack. His phone rang. The caller ID showed his union representative. Hello? Bennett, it's Carlos. Internal Affairs wants to interview you tomorrow at 10 a.m. What's the point? Bennett asked flatly. Everyone's seen the video. The point is to tell your side. Explain the stress you were under, how you perceived a threat. There was no threat, Bennett interrupted. We both know that. A long pause followed. Ray, don't say anything like that to IA. Let me and the lawyers handle this. Just show up tomorrow, okay? After hanging up, Bennett walked to his bathroom and stared at himself in the mirror. He barely recognized the haggard face looking back. 6 years on the force. He'd joined to make a difference, to help people. When had that changed? When had he become the kind of cop he used to criticize? His laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, the news homepage showing yet another article about Thomas Collins. The headline read, Family says comatose man was gentle soul who never harmed anyone. Bennett closed the laptop and reached for the bottle of whiskey beside it. As he poured a glass, his hand shook so badly that amber liquid splashed onto the counter. Tomorrow, he would have to face internal affairs and explain something he didn't fully understand himself. How a routine call about a $5 dispute had led him to potentially end a man's life. And for what? Bennett couldn't remember now what had made him so angry that day. It seemed impossibly trivial compared to the consequences that followed. He downed the whiskey in one swallow, feeling it burn all the way down. A small punishment for a much larger sin. 3 weeks had passed since Thomas Collins was rushed to county hospital. The medical staff had gradually reduced his sedation, hoping he would regain consciousness, but Thomas remained unresponsive. The machines continued their steady rhythm, monitoring, breathing, waiting. Detective Gloria Chen stood in Chief Henderson's office. Her final report on the internal affairs investigation spread out on his desk. Lieutenant Patel sat in a chair by the window, her expression carefully neutral. The evidence is conclusive, Chen said. Officer Bennett used excessive force with no justifiable reason. Collins posed no threat, made no aggressive movements, and was complying with instructions when Bennett took him down. Chief Henderson flipped through the report, his face growing grimmer with each page. And the previous complaints? There's a clear pattern of escalation over the past year and a half, Chen replied. Bennett's supervisor, Sergeant Hobbs, failed to properly address the warning signs. Hobbs admits he was aware of Bennett's personal issues but didn't think they were affecting his work. Recommended action? Henderson asked, though he already knew the answer. Termination of Officer Bennett for violation of multiple departmental policies, including excessive use of force and conduct unbecoming. Additionally, Sergeant Hobbs should be demoted and reassigned for failure of supervision. Henderson nodded slowly. The police commission meets tomorrow. I'll present your findings and recommendations. He closed the folder. Good work, Detective. There's one more thing, Chen added. The district attorney called this morning. They're planning to bring charges against Bennett. Aggravated assault and battery, possibly more depending on... She hesitated. Depending on whether Thomas Collins lives or dies, Henderson finished for her. Chen nodded grimly. Yes, sir. As Chen left, Lieutenant Patel moved to sit across from Henderson. The press is going to be all over this. We need a clear statement ready for after the commission meeting. Draft something, Henderson said. Emphasize transparency, accountability, and our commitment to rebuilding community trust. And Sergeant Hobbs? The union will fight his demotion. Henderson's expression hardened. Let them. This stops now. No more looking the other way when officers show warning signs. No more protecting bad cops at the expense of public trust. He stood up and walked to the window. We're supposed to protect and serve. Who was Bennett protecting when he slammed an unarmed man into the floor over $5? Ray Bennett's union representative, Carlos Vasquez, paced the small conference room while Bennett sat slumped in a chair, tie loose around his neck. The Internal Affairs report is being presented to the Police Commission tomorrow, Carlos said. Based on what my sources tell me, they're going to recommend termination. Bennett nodded dully. He'd expected as much. And there's more, Carlos continued. The DA is preparing to file criminal charges. Aggravated assault at minimum. Criminal charges. Bennett looked up, suddenly alert. I could go to prison? It's possible. The video evidence is damning and Collins' condition isn't improving. Carlos sat down across from Bennett. The union will provide legal representation for both the departmental hearing and the criminal case. But I need to be honest with you, this doesn't look good. Bennett ran his hands through his hair, which had grown unkempt over the past weeks. So what are my options? Carlos hesitated before answering. There is one alternative to consider. He slid a piece of paper across the table. Voluntary resignation. Quit? Bennett stared at the form. How does that help? If you resign before the commission votes to terminate you, it goes in your record as a resignation rather than a termination. You'd still face criminal charges, but you'd retain certain benefits, including partial pension, and it would be slightly less damaging if you ever tried to work in law enforcement again. Bennett gave a bitter laugh. You think anyone would ever hire me as a cop after this? Probably not, Carlos admitted. But the financial difference between resignation and termination is significant, and the criminal case will be easier to defend without an official finding of misconduct from your own department. Bennett picked up the resignation form, reading it slowly. When would this need to be submitted? Before the commission meeting tomorrow morning. By 8 a.m. at the latest. Bennett folded the paper and put it in his pocket. I'll think about it. In the hospital, Grace Collins sat beside Thomas's bed reading aloud from his favorite book. The doctors had encouraged her to talk to him, to read to him, to play music he enjoyed, anything that might stimulate his brain and help bring him back. A light knock on the door interrupted her reading. Lisa stood there with 2 cups of coffee and a paper bag. I brought you a sandwich, she said, handing 1 coffee and the bag to her mother. You need to eat something. Grace set the book down and accepted the food. Any news from Michael? Lisa nodded. He just texted. The lawyer called. Internal Affairs is recommending that Officer Bennett be fired. Grace took a sip of her coffee. Good. He shouldn't wear a badge ever again. There's more, Lisa continued. The district attorney is planning to file criminal charges. Grace looked at her son, lying still and pale in the hospital bed. Will that help Thomas? No, Lisa admitted. But maybe it will stop this from happening to someone else's son. Grace reached out to brush a lock of hair from Thomas's forehead. The doctors had removed most of the bandages, revealing the surgical scars where they'd operated to relieve the pressure on his brain. I keep thinking about that day, Grace said softly. He was just stopping to buy a drink after work. Such a small, ordinary thing. And now, her voice broke. Lisa put her arm around her mother's shoulders. Dr. Powell said there was some increased brain activity yesterday. That's a positive sign. I know, Grace said. I just want to hear his voice again. I want to see his smile. She squeezed Thomas's hand gently. I keep telling him it's time to wake up, that we're all waiting for him. That evening, Bennett sat at his kitchen table, the resignation form in front of him, filled out, but unsigned. His phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. Decision? Bennett didn't reply. Instead, he opened his laptop and searched for Thomas Collins' condition. The latest news article was from that morning. No change. Still in a coma. He closed the laptop and picked up a framed photo that had fallen face down on the counter. It showed a younger version of himself in his graduation uniform, smiling proudly beside his parents at the police academy ceremony. He barely recognized that eager young officer, so certain he would make a difference. What had changed? When had he started seeing every encounter as a potential threat? When had his first instinct become force rather than communication? Bennett thought of his divorce, the sleepless nights. the growing resentment toward a job that exposed him to the worst of humanity day after day. None of it excused what he'd done to Thomas Collins. He stared at the resignation form, pen in hand. Signing it felt like running away, like avoiding full responsibility. But Carlos was right, it was the practical choice. It would protect what little he had left. Bennett signed his name with a quick, angry stroke. Then he took a photo of the signed form and texted it to Carlos with the message, "We'll drop off original in morning." Carlos replied immediately, "Smart decision." This is for the best. Bennett wasn't so sure. Nothing about this felt like best. Not for Thomas Collins, not for the community's trust in police, not even for himself. But it was done now. He poured himself another drink, wondering if he would ever stop seeing Thomas Collins's face in his nightmares. The next morning, Chief Henderson arrived at headquarters early, preparing for the police commission meeting. As he walked through the lobby, he noticed Ray Bennett standing at the front desk, handing something to the desk officer. Henderson changed direction, approaching Bennett. "Officer Bennett." Bennett turned, startled. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, clothes wrinkled. "Chief?" he acknowledged stiffly. "What are you doing here?" Henderson asked, though he could guess. Bennett nodded toward the envelope he'd just handed over. "Submitting my resignation, effective immediately." Henderson's jaw tightened. "Running away won't fix what happened." "I know that," Bennett said quietly. "Nothing will fix it, but my union rep says this is better for everyone." "Better for you, maybe," Henderson replied coldly. "The Collins family might feel differently." Bennett looked down. "I know." After a pause, he added, "I never meant for any of this to happen. Intentions don't matter much now, do they?" Henderson turned to go, then stopped. "The DA is still filing charges. Resignation won't change that." "I know," Bennett repeated. "I'll turn myself in this afternoon." Henderson nodded once, then walked away, the resignation letter burning a hole in his conscience. The system had failed Thomas Collins long before Bennett slammed him into the floor. Failed by keeping an officer on the streets who clearly needed help. Failed by ignoring warning signs. Failed by valuing protection of their own over protection of the public. As he entered the elevator, Henderson made a silent promise to himself and to Thomas Collins. This case wouldn't be buried or forgotten. It would become the catalyst for real change in his department, no matter how uncomfortable that change might be. Across town, in a quiet hospital room, a nurse checked Thomas Collins' vital signs and made notes in his chart. As she adjusted his pillow, she noticed something that made her pause. She leaned closer, watching intently. Thomas's eyelids had fluttered, just slightly, just for a moment, but unmistakably. She pressed the call button for the doctor, hope rising in her chest for the first time in weeks. "Dr. Powell," she said when the doctor answered. "I think he might be waking up." 6 months had passed since that fateful day at Main Street Convenience. The summer heat had given way to fall colors, and now winter was beginning to settle over the city. In a bright physical therapy room at Riverside Rehabilitation Center, Thomas Collins gripped the parallel bars tightly, sweat beading on his forehead, as he focused on putting one foot in front of the other. "That's it, Thomas, you're doing great." His therapist, Diane, encouraged from beside him. Just 3 more steps to the end. Thomas's arms shook with effort as he inched forward. His mother, Grace, watched from the corner of the room, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. Each small victory in Thomas's recovery felt like a miracle to her, from the first flutter of his eyelids 6 months ago to today's determined steps. Thomas reached the end of the bars and smiled weakly at Diane. "Made it." "You sure did," Diane beamed at him. "And that's 2 feet farther than last week." Grace approached as Diane helped Thomas into his wheelchair. "You're getting stronger every day," she said, squeezing his shoulder gently. Thomas nodded, too tired to speak further. The brain injury had affected his speech, leaving his words slow and sometimes slurred. The doctors had explained that the part of his brain controlling motor functions had been damaged when his head hit the floor. They couldn't say for certain how much function he would regain, only that recovery from traumatic brain injury was measured in months and years, not days and weeks. As Diane wheeled Thomas back to his room, Grace walked alongside them. "Your brother Michael is coming by tonight," she told Thomas. He's bringing those spicy wings you like. Thomas smiled. Food had become one of his greatest pleasures since waking from the coma. Simple joys took on new significance when you'd nearly lost everything. In his room, Thomas used a communication tablet to type what he couldn't easily say aloud. His fingers moved slowly across the screen. "When is the court date?" Grace sighed. They'd had this conversation several times. Thomas's memory wasn't always reliable since the injury. "Next Tuesday. The district attorney is going to call to prepare you tomorrow, but you don't have to testify in person. They'll use your video statement." Thomas nodded, then typed again. "I want to be there." "Thomas, the doctors don't think—" He cut her off, speaking aloud with effort. "Need to see him. Face to face." Grace understood. Thomas had been robbed of so much: his health, his independence, his job. The least he deserved was to look Ray Bennett in the eye as justice was served. "Okay," she conceded. "We'll talk to the doctors again. If they approve, we'll make it happen." In the county courthouse conference room, District Attorney Eleanor Wright reviewed her notes with her assistant Ryan Cho.
"Bennett rejected the plea deal," Wright said, tapping her pen against the table. "He's insisting on going to trial." "It's a risk," Cho replied. "Juries are unpredictable in police cases, even with the video evidence." Wright nodded. "True, but—"
"In this case, public sentiment is overwhelmingly against Bennett, and the evidence is exceptionally strong. His attorney will play up his record of service, his personal struggles, try to humanize him to the jury. Which is why we need the Collins family in that courtroom," Wright said firmly, "to remind the jury of the human cost of Bennett's actions." She checked her watch. "The family's attorney should be here any minute to discuss the civil settlement." On cue, there was a knock at the door, and Anthony Washington entered, briefcase in hand. "The city agreed to the terms," he announced without preamble. "Full settlement of $4.2 million, plus the policy reforms we requested." Wright raised an eyebrow. "All of them?" "Everyone," Washington confirmed as he took a seat. "Mandatory de-escalation training, body cameras that can't be turned off during active calls, civilian oversight board with actual teeth, and most importantly, a new policy preventing officers under investigation for serious misconduct from resigning to avoid having the findings go in their permanent record." "The Collins rule," Wright said. "That's what the press is calling it." Washington nodded. "Grace Collins insisted on it. She said the money was secondary. The changes were what mattered." "How is Thomas doing?" Cho asked. "Better each week," Washington replied. "The doctors are cautiously optimistic. He's walking short distances with assistance now. His speech is improving, though he still uses a tablet for complex communication. The cognitive recovery is slower, but there's progress." "Will he be able to testify?" Wright asked. "He wants to," Washington said. "Very badly. Whether he's medically cleared is another question. But I wouldn't bet against him. He's one determined man." Former Officer Ray Bennett sat across from his defense attorney in a similar conference room down the hall. Unlike the bustling energy of the prosecution's preparation, this room felt heavy with resignation. "You should have taken the plea deal," his attorney Paul Winters said bluntly. 5 years, eligible for parole in 3. Now you're looking at potentially 15 years if convicted on all counts. Bennett stared at the table. "I'm not pleading guilty to something I don't fully remember." Winters sighed in frustration. "Ray, the video shows exactly what happened. Your memory issues don't change that." "I know what the video shows," Bennett said quietly. "But I still don't understand why I reacted that way. It's like watching someone else wearing my uniform, using my body." "Save the dissociation defense for the psychiatrists," Winters replied. "Juries don't like it, especially with clear video evidence." Bennett looked up. "Is it true Thomas Collins might testify?" "His attorney has indicated he wants to, yes. But given his medical condition, the judge may not allow it." "I want to talk to him," Bennett said suddenly. Winters stared at him in disbelief. "Absolutely not. Any contact with the victim would violate your bail conditions and—" "Not now," Bennett interrupted. "In court. If he testifies, I want to address him directly to apologize. First of all, that's not how court works. Second, a last-minute apology will look self-serving to the jury. I don't care how it looks, Bennett insisted. I've had 6 months to think about what I did. About the man whose life I destroyed over nothing. I need him to hear it from me directly. Winters studied his client, seeing the genuine remorse in his face. It wouldn't be enough to keep him out of prison, but maybe it could bring some small measure of peace to both men. I'll see what I can do, he said finally. But don't get your hopes up. The day of the trial arrived with media trucks parked outside the courthouse and demonstrators holding signs calling for justice. Inside, the Collins family gathered. In a private waiting room, Grace, Lisa, Michael, and finally Thomas in his wheelchair. Thomas wore a suit that hung loosely on his thinner frame. 6 months of hospital food and physical therapy had changed his once athletic build, but his eyes were clear and determined as the court officer came to escort them to the courtroom. As Thomas was wheeled in, a hush fell over the packed room. Many people were seeing him for the first time since the viral video of his injury. The contrast between the healthy man in the video and the thin, fragile-looking person before them now was stark and powerful. Ray Bennett sat at the defense table, turning as Thomas entered. Their eyes met briefly before Bennett looked away, unable to hold Thomas's steady gaze. The judge called the court to order, and the proceedings began. The prosecutor's opening statement was powerful but factual, walking through the events at the convenience store without unnecessary emotion. The video would provide enough of that. Bennett's attorney emphasized his client's years of service and the split-second nature of police decisions, though even he seemed to recognize the weakness of these arguments against the evidence. When it came time for witness testimony, the prosecution called Thomas Collins first. A court officer wheeled him to the witness stand, and the judge instructed the jury that due to his medical condition, he would be permitted to use a communication tablet when needed. Mr. Collins, the prosecutor began gently, can you tell the court what you remember about October 14th of last year? Thomas spoke slowly but clearly. I remember. Going to the store, buying a drink, arguing about change. He paused, gathering strength. Then the officer came in. He seemed angry from the start. And what happened next? Thomas reached for his tablet, typing carefully. The court officer read his words aloud. Everything happened very fast. He got close to me. I tried to stay calm. Then suddenly I was falling. Then nothing until I woke up in the hospital months later. Thank you, Mr. Collins. No further questions. The defense attorney approached cautiously. Mr. Collins, did you at any point feel threatened by the store clerk? No. Did you raise your voice during the argument about change? Probably, but not threatening. And you've seen the video of the incident? Yes, many times, the attorney nodded. No further questions. As Thomas was wheeled back toward his family, Bennett suddenly stood up. Your Honor, may I address Mr. Collins directly? The judge frowned. This is highly irregular, Mr. Bennett. Please, Bennett insisted. Just 1 minute. After a brief conference with both attorneys, the judge reluctantly agreed. 1 minute, Mr. Bennett. This is not to be construed as testimony. Bennett turned to face Thomas, who had stopped his wheelchair near the gallery. Mr. Collins, Bennett began, his voice unsteady. No apology can undo what I did to you. No explanation can justify it. I've spent every day since then trying to understand why I reacted with such unnecessary force. The truth is I was failing as a person long before I failed as an officer that day. Thomas watched him silently. Expression unreadable. I will accept whatever punishment the court decides, Bennett continued. But I wanted you to hear directly from me. I am profoundly sorry for the pain and damage I've caused you and your family. For a long moment, Thomas said nothing. Then he slowly raised his hand to his tablet and typed. The court fell silent, waiting. The court officer read aloud, I forgive you, not for you, but for me, so I can heal and move forward. A collective exhale seemed to sweep through the courtroom. Bennett nodded once, eyes glistening, then sat down. The trial would continue, but something important had just transpired between the two men at its center. 1 year later, Thomas Collins sat in his mother's backyard, watching his niece and nephew play tag around the old oak tree. His walking had improved enough that he now used a cane instead of a wheelchair, though he still tired easily. His speech was clearer, though he sometimes struggled to find words. Ray Bennett was serving an 8-year sentence for aggravated assault. The Collins family settlement had paid for Thomas's ongoing care and rehabilitation, but perhaps most importantly, the Collins rule had been adopted by police departments across the state, preventing officers from resigning to avoid misconduct findings. Additional reforms were being implemented: better training, stricter oversight, more accountability. Lisa brought Thomas a glass of lemonade and sat beside him. The community center called. "They want to know if you'll speak at their police reform workshop next month." Thomas smiled. "Tell them yes." His voice was soft but determined. "My story needs to be heard." In the distance, his niece laughed as she tagged her brother and ran away. Thomas watched them, grateful for simple moments he had almost lost forever. The path forward remained long and uncertain, but he was walking it one step at a time, turning personal tragedy into purpose, not just for himself, but for all those who would come after.